Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of the Ascendis Executive Hour. I'm Lauren Young, and I will serve as your moderator for today's discussion. Our topic is Where Trust is Planted, Business Blooms. And I'm joined by the founders of Upsurge Advisors, Denny McGurer and Nicole Falco, as well as a very special guest, author of The 1 Minute Manager and over 60 additional books, Ken Blanchard. Denny, Nicole, and Ken, welcome to the show today.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. So let's start off with Denny. Could you introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Lauren. Well, I've had the pleasure over 30 years experience both domestically and internationally to be actively involved in corporate leadership, executive coaching, sales management training, and some impactful team development. This experience, along with numerous colleagues, has really helped me to identify a key area, trust, as a critical need for leaders and organizations to address in a positive but assertive manner, and thus impacting their business in a successful manner. I'd like to just turn this over to my partner, who has some other observations and some wonderful experiences to share around this topic, Nicole Falco.
Thanks, Denny. So my knack is really for finding fresh ways to ignite behavior change. I like putting the newest learning science, technology, and strategies to work. And the latest that I've been able to do is working with Denny at Upsurge Advisors, where we're really pouring our passion into helping leaders with what we believe is the toughest part of leadership. And that's really working with and through people. But it's also the part of leadership that's the most rewarding and how leaders contribute the most value to organizations. So we've really had a great time working with emerging and experienced leaders to equip them to build trust, to break down silos, and really improve their influence.
Fantastic. Thanks, Denny and Nicole. All right, Ken, please chime in and share a little bit about yourself.
Well, my goal in life is to get the BS out of the behavioral sciences and see if I can make it come alive so people can really use what we know about human interaction and all. And I've been doing that for well over 40 years. We have our own company that my wife and I started, the Ken Blanchard Companies, and it's really been fun. And in terms of this topic of trust, Cindy Olmstead, who was one of our consulting partners for a number of years, started studying trust for 20 years, and we wrote a book together called Trust Works. So I've been really interested in this, and also just seeing the power of trust in organizations when it's a healthy environment that people really feel they can bring their best self to the table without being attacked and all that kind of thing. It just makes such a difference. So I'm excited about being with you.
We're excited to have you here. All right, so let's start with the title of this podcast, which is Where Trust is Planted, Business Blooms. Now, some may see this to be a very bold statement. Nicole, how can you prove this to be true?
Well, Lauren, I'm going to go right to the facts. I've got 3 for you that really illustrate the tangible effect that trust has on stakeholder value, employees, and customers. So the first one is that total return to shareholders in high-trust organizations is almost 3 times higher than the return in low-trust organizations, and that's from a Watson-Wyatt study. From a Gallup study, we find out that 96% of engaged employees, but only 46% of disengaged employees trust management. So huge impact there on employees. And then this is a wonderful quote from the Harvard Business Review. This is Deepa Prahalad says, "The trust inside companies helps to build some of the fundamental building blocks of innovation, and the trust with consumers enables companies to engage in co-creation, enjoy high levels of engagement, and ensure the relevance of their offerings." So there's a lot backing up that where trust is planted, business blooms.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing those. Ken, we know that you've been writing on the concept of trust for a few decades now. So how has trust evolved since you started writing your book?
Well, Lauren, I think it's much more important nowadays. You know, in the old days, I think people really felt in organizations that it was a hierarchical thing, and it was kind of my way or the highway, and the assumption was that all the energy moved up the hierarchy, and that's where all the brains were. But I think now with the millennials and the people there who really are interested in side-by-side leadership, not top-down leadership. That's why I've gotten really interested in the whole concept of servant leadership. Trust has become so much more important, and because what people are doing nowadays is that they aren't signing up for a company and then figure they're going to be there the rest of your life. I remember I graduated from Cornell back in the 60s. A friend of mine got a job with AT&T, and he called home and his mother cried and said, "You're set for life." And it's just not like that, where people, if they are in an environment where there's not trust and they don't think they can make a contribution, they go somewhere else. So I think it's really important about keeping your good people is to have that trusting environment.
Absolutely. I have a follow-up question for you, Ken. What do you see to be the future of trust in organizations?
Well, I think it's just going to be so important, and where I tie that in is all the great companies I have seen, they look at their number one customer as their people. If they take care of their people, they train their people, they develop a trusting environment, their people get fully engaged and excited, and then they go out of their way to serve the second most important customer, the people who use your products and services. And when they go like that and create a trusting relationship with them, and they become raving fans and they become part of your sales force, and that takes care of the whole concept of the owners and all that. I think in the past people have felt that the only reason to be in business is to make money, and customers are somewhat important, but people, they're interchangeable and all. And trust and building environment and a culture that really people want to be part of was not really important. And I think it's now just so key. And people are realizing today that the profit is the applause you get for creating a motivating, trusting environment so people will take care of your customers. And so I think it's really evolving into a major factor.
Very interesting. Thank you. Denny, let's go to you. Long before performance indicators start to point in the wrong direction, there are probably going to be some warning signs that indicate trust within an organization is in jeopardy. So what do you feel leaders should look for as signs of low trust in their business?
Well, I think it's important, like being a good listener. You better be a good observer. And Ken's words, spoken and written over the years, are highlighted by these words. People trust their leadership. When they do, they're willing to turn their backs to their bosses. And at first you say, wait a minute, what's that all about? My point, in agreement with Ken, is it allows me to share some flags I've seen related to leaders building a trusting environment. And I'd like to go through those briefly. A real red flag for leaders is people are more focused on what leaders are saying and doing than on their own work. Uncertainty about true intentions of leaders keeping employees performing to their best. And there's a real opportunity if you can get them to think that way. And there's a trusting environment that Ken's referenced earlier. A second warning sign of low trust is an environment of platitudes that do not play out in reality. I hear numerous leaders over the years espousing their values around respect for individual, diversity, falling forward. Yet when you talk to the employees, there's a fear in the air, a fear that if they try to have work-life balance, they'll be passed up for promotions, or nervous jokes are said about them looking for a new job after making a mistake. A third area I would like to call attention to are leaders who never get wind of red or yellow flags that have the most to worry about. If they're being insulated from the truth about their organization's culture, they're allowing what I constantly remind people of, their ego to dominate their leadership behaviors. They're not positioned for empathy, and without empathy, there can be no trust in an organization. There's a lot been written about how important data is to leaders, and that's certainly appropriate if it's used well. It reveals important patterns and trends. But I would suggest don't let it obscure your view of people behind those patterns. And over-reliance on data creates a distance that can be a disaster for a trusting environment. One of my favorite points to pass along to people and share with them in my coaching experience is people that will not leave the confines of their daily work and walk around the business. I encourage them to meet with employees on their turf, and as Ken has demonstrated many times in presentations, turn your organizational chart upside down, spend some time in the shoes of your employees, find out what they feel, the heat in the manufacturing floor or the cold walking into a freezer. Field a few complaint calls. Walk from a parking lot to a building in January. Sit in on the customer service call. I just had a unique experience with a customer call center in Dallas, Texas, a large organization. I got an individual on the phone. He was the founder of the organization, and every week he spends an hour in the customer call center himself answering calls. What kind of trust do you think that builds up? I also encourage people not to overanalyze customer satisfaction results in Twitter comments. Go out and talk to your customers, as I just stated. Listen to them attentively. Watch firsthand how they experience your product or service, and try to order something from your own company or ask the delivery team a technical question. I know Ken does that with his organization almost on a weekly basis. Lastly, I would suggest witness how working with your company impacts supplier's business. Are you a healthy partner or a customer to be endured? Do they want your revenue, or do they cringe when you reorder? These are powerful ways I'd suggest to spot trust. What should leaders do if they see warning signs or trust is good and they want it better? Well, I'd like to turn it over to my very able partner to share some of her insights and experiences we've had over the last few years. Nicole?
Sure. Thanks, Denny. Well, first of all, I just want to sum up a lot of what you talked about, and that is that, Lauren, you just asked a great question about, where are the warning signs? Well, the most important thing is to be looking for the warning signs, right? I mean, don't turn a blind eye to those and pay attention to what's happening. And Denny did a great job of showing where the warning signs show up, and it's all areas of the company. It's with the employees, with the customers, and with the suppliers. I mean, you want to be a good business all around in the marketplace. And I think, we asked Ken that question about what's different about trust. And I think as we look at the evolution, that's part of it too, that, we always looked at that relationship just with the customer. And as Ken pointed out, it starts out with the relationship with the employees, and then that has the effect on the relationship with the customer. And I would argue now, with information being so transparent, it's with the whole community that we serve and we operate in. So first of all, look for the warning signs. And then Ken actually brings up a great starting point. In Collaboration Begins With You, his latest book, he talks about nurturing safety and trust. I just had a personal experience working with a project leader where she wants collaboration, but it's not a safe environment for collaboration. And I'm watching that effect on the team. It's really profound. So one of the things that we provide at Upsurge Advisors is a program called Opt-in and Trust. I'll say that again because it's kind of a unique name. It's Opt-in and Trust. And what we do through that program is help organizations illuminate trust building and trust breaking behaviors based on that organization's unique culture. And then once we have that understanding of what builds trust and what can destroy trust inside of the culture, we then take it to the next step. So recognizing and actively pursuing trust-building behaviors, that's the foundation, and then we equip leaders with practical tools and methods for triaging trust levels and taking appropriate action to cultivate or repair trust. So bringing in intervention. So if you see the red flags, or ideally you see them as yellow flags before they're red flags, but when you see that, then taking steps like bringing in books, Ken's got a few that are wonderful, or bringing in a program like Opt-in and Trust, and really taking action to ensure that people know what is required to build and sustain trust.
Fantastic. That's a great way to increase that trust within and around your organization. So thank you for telling us about that. It's called Opt-in and Trust, Nicole?
Yes, that's the name of it.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, Nicole and Denny, how can our listeners contact you if they have additional questions about building trust within their organization?
Oh, sure, Lauren. Well, first of all, the easiest thing to do is just go to our website, UpsurgeAdvisors.com. And so it's the word Upsurge. Advisors is ADVISORS, advisors.com. You can also reach out to us on Twitter at Upsurge Advisors. On Twitter is another way.
Perfect. And Ken, where can our listeners find more information about your books and your consulting firm?
They can first of all go to kenblanchardbooks.com, and they can find out about our book and trust and collaboration or any of them, or they can go to just kenblanchard.com, our company website. So either one of those would do it.
Wonderful. All right. Nicole and Denny, what do you have coming up? Where can we find the Upsurge Advisors team in the near future?
Well, as Nicole referenced earlier, you can go to our website, and we're in the process right now of finalizing a couple speaking engagements and also 2 or 3 conferences where we're going to be hopefully present with not only the trust workshop, but some of our other modules for training and team development. And again, if there's a coaching need out there, just drop us a note and we'll circle back with you. We have a very specific process that we use. A lot of things we've learned from people like Ken Blanchard and others throughout the country and overseas. So we will welcome inquiries at any time.
That's great. Ken, is there anything else you'd like to add? Nicole mentioned that your latest book, Collaboration Begins With You, is available. Are you currently working on any other books?
Well, I had a new book came out last week. It's called 1 Minute Mentoring. And I wrote it with Claire Diaz-Ortiz, and she was one of the first employees at Twitter. She wrote a book called Twitter for Good. She got the Pope to Twitter, and she's quite a gal. She's 35 years old, and I'm 78, and she came to me and said, Ken, in the past, mentors have always been older than you, and I think us youngins could learn from the wisdom you all have, but you older folks could learn something from us younger folks, particularly around technology. And so we wrote a book really basically on cross-generational mentoring, and we called it 1 Minute Mentoring because, you know, the best advice people ever got usually comes in a quick phone call or a luncheon, you know, not necessarily in a long kind of relationship, but you can learn big picture stuff for your life and all from a mentoring thing. And so it's been great to work with her on that, and we're going to give a big presentation at the big ATD, Association of Training Developers, in Atlanta later this month, so it's going to be fun.
Fantastic, and that's great. Well, that wraps this edition of the Ascendis Executive Hour. On behalf of the entire Ascendis team, I'd like to thank both Denny McGurer and Nicole DeFalco of Upsurge Advisors for your participation, as well as Ken Blanchard for taking some time out of your busy schedule to share some great takeaways about trust with us. Take care, and we'll chat with you again on the next Ascendis Executive Hour.